Hey, Sex Positive Podcast listeners, this is Desiree from Ohio, and I'm coming at you with some of my thoughts on relationships, dating, romance, all that fun stuff. So basically, I grew up in a pretty small town with my sister, who's like 3 years younger than me, and we were always kind of tomboys. I can remember from when I was little. I, played with Matchbox cars and G.I. Joes. And, like, I still played with Barbies and stuff like that. But I was always a tomboy. We would play with the boys in the neighborhood and we would, like, karate kick each other in the face. And it was fun. And that's what I like to do. I wasn't about, playing pretty princesses and baking cookies. I was like, let's go get in the mud and give each other bruises. That was my childhood. And so that carried over into teenagerhood and adulthood. So high school was really awkward for me because I didn't really fit in with the other girls. They were kind of not my type of people. And I got along better with the boys, but, in high school, that's just kind of a weird dynamic to have guy friends. So, it was weird. High school was weird. But yeah, and then after high school, it was still the same thing. Like, I preferred to hang out with guys. And a lot of the girls I knew kind of, would make comments, and, me and my sister were looked down on for, hanging out with guys. But the thing was, if I hung out with girls and I started talking about cars or, bands or, whatever, like just things that I was interested in, they couldn't relate. Talking with the guys, they could, and I found that a lot of times hanging out with the girls, it was a lot of, just stuff I was not interested in. Like, let's do makeovers and go shop. I mean, I love shopping, but, it was just, I felt so much more comfortable being around guys than girls. Girls, and to this day still, girls make me nervous. I can't handle being around girls. And, does that lead to some sort of like stigma? Yeah, I think so, because I think a lot of times if you're a girl and you have a lot of guy friends, you might get labeled a whore or a slut because they probably figure, why are you hanging out with all these guys all the time? There must be a reason. Well, sorry, bitches. It's seriously just because I don't like you. But, anyway, so, now fast forward, however many years, and I have a great boyfriend. And he loves that I am the way I am. I can take care of myself. I'm independent. We have a great dynamic relationship. We're equals. So I don't make him pay for everything. He doesn't make me pay for everything. We're very much like, equals. We split the bills half and half, and we work together. If there's a spider in the bathroom, I make him kill it because spiders are gross. But, on the same token, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something I would help him with. I don't know. I mean, it's like I still do the girl thing. Like, I help him pick out, an outfit to wear to an interview and stuff. But, there's really no, like, pants wearer in our relationship. And I like it that way because it's just like we're totally comfortable with whatever. And, if I don't feel like making dinner, then I ask him to do it and he does it. And if the apartment's messy, he cleans it or I clean it. It doesn't matter. It just gets cleaned. Nobody has gender-based tasks that they have to perform in our relationship. And that's cool, if we have poker night, then I get to play and he watches the baby. It's like, it just, and same, if it's Destiny night, then I take care of Ariana and he will play his video game. So, it works for us. And, I'm sure there's other relationships out there that have different dynamics. And some women really want the June cleaver. I'm working in my house with my red gingham apron and making dinner for my husband, who will be home at 5:35 p.m. with his suit and tie. That's not for me. I would probably hang myself with said gingham apron. Yeah, but so yeah, I think my main idea on relationships and love is that it's a decision. Love isn't created overnight, and it's definitely something that you need to work on. It's a decision. And that's, a lot of people say that, but it really is. I mean, you decide to love somebody, and you're there for them. And once you've gone through, so many life things with that person and they've been by your side, then you know that you'll be with this person, or that they're there for you. That is love to me. Is just proving that you're always there for each other through everything. So, I think that's all. Oh, my daughter has input. I think that's what she said. So yeah, that's all I think I have to say for now that I can think of anyway. So thanks for having me. I enjoyed the podcast. Bye. Oh, and you can follow me on Instagram at Desiree Dynamite, or you can follow me on. I have a blog. And it's blog.fitspirationorange.com.
Hey, Desi, thank you for taking the time to help me out with my podcast. It's a very daunting task, especially when you're putting everything you have on the line with your thoughts and things like that. And especially with sex positivism, where there's a lot of hatred on the men's right side or on the women's right side of things. So having equal balance is always fun and amazing, and I appreciate you helping me with my adventure because it is a very tough thing to do. I think it's really interesting is kind of what you hit on is the fact that in your town, in the northeast of Ohio, which is pretty much almost towards Pennsylvania, so you're literally in the middle of nowhere. So it's an hour and a half to Erie, Pennsylvania, another 2 or 3 hours to Rochester. I think you're like 10 hours away from New York City, and then like 8 or 9 hours, I think, from Chicago. So if it puts perspective in the listener's ear or in your mind of kind of where in Ohio that this is, you're in the middle of nowhere. There's only 5,000 people that live in the town that you live in, and it takes you an hour to get to any sort of civilization. And all there is farms, and you have 2 high schools, and there's a lake, the lake that separates Ohio and Canada, which is Lake Erie. But, kind of touching on what Desi's talking about is the fact that when you live in a place like this, and you're trying to find your own identity of who you are as a person, and you live in a very small place, it becomes very gender segregated. And it's not on purpose, I don't think. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's up to the listener to determine that. But, Desi had a very difficult place to live where a lot of people don't. Where there's more people, and like the high school that I went to before that I moved to Ohio, there was 5,000 people that went to my school. Well, there's probably only 1,000 people that went to Desi's school. I actually kind of miss, in a way, the time that I lived there. I think I lived in that part of Ohio for maybe 3 years, and we had a lot of fun. In a small town like that, you can really meet some cool people, and I think I met Desi through working at Pizza Hut or something like that. I don't even know anymore. I'm not even sure how we met, to be honest. There's so many people that we all knew, as everybody knew each other in that town, and I had just moved there randomly, so it was interesting. I like how you talk about the the equality that you have in your relationship now with your boyfriend. It's really interesting because there's not many people who have that, where you equally support each other and help each other in what you're doing. Um, and it's awesome that he kills spiders. That's always a good quality in a dude, even if he's scared of them himself. So that's pretty epic. And thanks for having your daughter in there too. Don't separate that out from any of the things that you do, whether it's your blog or your videos that you do, or hopefully further podcasting adventures with me. That's awesome. Trust me, it makes for a fun dynamic because people want to hear that. It's cool.
Hi, my name is Julian Adorni. I am an author, an entrepreneur, a marketer, and an economist. Um, and when I look at dating, I tend to look at it in part through an economics lens. And I think that economics can help explain some aspects of dating. This isn't to say that dating is crass or commercial, because I think a lot of people have this misconception that economics is all about dollars and cents. It's not at all. Economics is fundamentally the study of human action, and I think can explain, in some cases, human action around dating just as easily as it can explain human action around, creating businesses and monopolies and things like that. One of the key insights of economics is the idea of spontaneous order or emergent order. This was a concept created by Friedrich Hayek, brilliant Austrian economist of the 20th century. Spontaneous order is the idea that the economy and institutions and everything that we live through arises largely from human planning, but not from human design. So, for instance, everyone plans. That's a given. So the idea that spontaneous order is spontaneous is a little bit of a misnomer. Spontaneous order isn't about spontaneity. It's about the idea that everyone plans not for other people, but we just plan for ourselves. I just plan for myself. You plan for yourself. John over there plans for himself. And then the sum of all these plans kind of comes together organically from the bottom up to create a fluid, evolving, beautiful, and ultimately ordered system that no one set out to create. That's why it's not a product of human design. There's no central architect that sat above creating these institutions. So, let me give an example. Engineer wages. No central planner sat out and thought, well, today I'm going to set the wages of all engineers in the United States at $47 an hour, $90,000 a year. That doesn't work. Governments tried that sometimes in the 20th century, and it failed miserably. Instead, engineer wages kind of emerged from the bottom up. So, for instance, if Microsoft tries to hire a computer engineer, they might bid, say, $40 an hour, $80,000 a year for that engineer. IBM then jumps in and bids $45 an hour for that engineer. Then Apple jumps in and bids, say, like $47 an hour. And and so Apple's just planning for itself. It's planning to get the highest quality engineers it can. Same thing with Microsoft and IBM. Then engineers also try and plan their futures and their careers. So they'll look at these competing offers and take the best jobs. The process doesn't stop there though, because then there's a constant feedback mechanism wherein companies, if Apple hires an engineer for $47 an hour and the engineer only produces $40 an hour of value, then Apple kind of looks at its bottom line and goes, wow, we're losing money on this engineer. We've either got to cut the program or lower his wages. And so you see this kind of constant feedback mechanism wherein wages are determined by all the different actors involved. The engineers, the companies hiring them, other firms, there are some other factors. And this feedback mechanism gives rise to a very kind of fluid, flexible, sort of going rate for engineers. And I'll pick a hypothetical, maybe it's like $45 an hour. Honestly, I have no idea what it is. I imagine it varies quite a bit across disciplines, civil engineers versus aerospace engineers versus bridge designers, and that's part of the point. the wage varies based on the engineer's expertise and based on the skill set and based on the history. But you do create this kind of fluid, flexible baseline wherein people can expect that if they go to college and they major in, say, civil engineering, they'll expect to make about 40 bucks an hour, 80,000 bucks a year. Again, these are made up numbers. And so here you have a case where wage rates are kind of determined. They're not set from the top down. Again, like the czar of price controls doesn't step in and say, well, this year we're going to make wages for civil engineers 40 bucks an hour. Instead, it's created by this beautiful kind of organic bottom up process. It's the product of what Frederick Hayek called human planning, but not human design. And we see the same thing in dating. Dating mores and rules of behavior they spring up all around us. They're very organic. For instance, if you're a heterosexual guy, and you're going out with a girl, how you treat her will be largely determined, or in part determined by what you see your friends doing, what you see your family doing with their dates, what you see on TV. TV shows like Friends or Will and Grace or Frasier often have a significant impact on the cultural rules and institutions around dating and love for us. Or if you're a heterosexual guy and you're dating a girl and none of your friends cheat on their girlfriends, then odds are that you're going to kind of internalize that behavior and also be faithful to your girlfriend. And so in this way, these kind of rules and behaviors spread. Or in the same way, and you also incorporate feedback from real experience. So for instance, if you decide that, again, I'm assuming heterosexual guy here, if you decide that you want the girl to pay for the entire first date, and you decide to be a real douchebag and spring that on her at the end of the date, and be like, hey, after this expensive dinner, tips on you, dinner's on you, peace out, and you amazingly don't get a second date, you can kind of look back on that and be like, oh, so maybe that's not the best idea, And so that will inform how you approach girls and how you approach first dates and how you date in the future. And you'll be probably more chivalrous in the future. And so these kind of social institutions emerge. The idea that, typically between a guy and a girl, the guy pays for the first date. Or, typically you don't have sex on the first date. And they're obviously, these aren't like universal rules, but they're relatively sort of standard a little bit. Or the idea that, if you, on the first date, the idea that if you go and get completely blasted and trashed on the first date, that's generally frowned on. These are all cases of cultural rules and institutions that no one created. No one person sat down and said, today I'm going to create a rule of things that no one should ever do on a first date. And then put that in place and promulgated it and made it, the law of the land. That's not how these things work. Instead, they're very bottom up. They're a case of spontaneous order. I plan how to do the best I can by the girl I date, and your friend plans to do the best he can by the girl he dates, and a girl you might know plans how to do the best by the guy or the girl that she dates, and from that process where we all plan for ourselves, this kind of emergent order happens, and so partly you can kind of look at this, and you can gain some insights from this. And this is not a new idea, by the way. I'm not inventing this concept, but you can gain some interesting insights from this. What I would argue is one of them, and this is off the sphere of dating. I would argue that because the economy is created by this kind of social or spontaneous order, this emergent order, just like dating in, it would be as ridiculous to regulate economic plan or regulate the economy as it would be to regulate dating. Just like it would be ridiculous for the government to come in and tell you, John, you can't date Sarah, you have to date, Katie instead. So it's also ridiculous for the government to come in and tell you, okay, you can't work for this company, you have to work for this company instead. And that's what we've seen in many socialist countries. Just as it would be absurd for the government to step in and tell you, well, you may really dig this guy you're dating, but we don't think he's very high quality, so we're going to kind of nix this relationship. That would be absurd. In the same way, it would be pretty ridiculous for the government to step in and say, hey, you might like your job where you're making $6 an hour, you might be getting really great real-world experience and be boosting your career quite a bit, but we think that, you shouldn't be allowed to work for $6 an hour, so we're just going to nix that job. When individuals plan for themselves, when I go out and, plan my dating life for myself and go out and go after the girls that appeal to me, even if they don't appeal to someone else, and, if no one from the top if no central planner or central architect tries to, design this dating system for us, basically, if we all are free to kind of run our own dating lives, that's when things really work out. And I would argue the same thing is true for the economy. When you let people be free, when you let private firms and people, choose their jobs, choose their employees, choose what business they want to go into, choose how they're going to go into business, choose. Basically, when you eliminate a lot of the government regulation, that's when the economy really starts to thrive. And when you add in this government regulation, it doesn't work. Just like it wouldn't work if the government stepped in and forced you to date John instead of Jack, or Katie instead of Sarah, or anything else. Central planners might be okay at designing. So the central parallel I see from all this central takeaway. Is that central planners might be okay at planning their own lives. If you put me in charge of a country, I could still plan my own dating life and my own career. But they're freaking hopeless at planning for the rest of us because they don't know us and they never can. Having some guy in Washington D.C. choose your career or your dating life or anything else would be pretty ridiculous. And having him regulates or regulates. Either one of those or nudge you towards different decisions would also be pretty ridiculous. In commerce or in business as in dating, when you let the beauty of spontaneous order happen, really fantastic things occur. So that's it. That's my 2 cents on dating and the economy. And by the way, if you are so determined, I'm not a relationship expert, so I didn't want to go into that area, but if you are so inclined, the fact that dating is largely created by an emergent order does have implications for dating. And if you are more inclined to analyze romance than I am, then you can probably pick out some insights from that. If you start looking at dating through the lens of the economy, and if you start looking at it as human action, just like commerce, you can pick up some really interesting stuff. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm Julian Adorni, and thanks for listening.
Julian, thank you for taking the time to help me out with my podcast. I really like your ideas within economics and how it relates to dating, and the fact that we are all striving for our own ends, our own personal interests. And I like how you kind of define that within the spontaneous order of planning for unplanned things, I think I would like to call it, in a more philosophical way than I can explain it. It's not exactly the most easiest thing for me to define. And since you're an actual economist, I appreciate it, because I really don't know how to describe things like that. I think it's really cool, how you kind of talk about in the idea of forcing relationships and government planned relationships. I met a couple in 2000 or so before the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. And I had met multiple couples like this where they had got together, they married just for the purpose of having a planned relationship, because the Army's requirement was that if you wanted to have a certain type of income, then you had to be married. So it pretty much forced on people to get married. And there was a lot of people who were polyamorous or were a gay man and a gay woman. They decided to have a relationship, and it was kind of forced upon them to have a relationship, and they just got married, and if they got caught, they got caught, but if they were dating other people. So it is kind of interesting how you kind of talk about that, and eliminating the forced idea of government-required relationships. So I think it's kind of cool. I really appreciate your thoughts, and definitely, if you can, next week, if you could send in another MP3 on, what your ideas are within dating and relationships, I'd certainly appreciate it, especially any of your adventures, or if you're in a monogamous relationship, include her or him. I definitely appreciate that. It'd be pretty epic. I hope everybody has an awesome Friday. If you have the chance, please go back through the rest of our episodes of Sex Positive Podcast. Definitely check out, this is our 7th episode, I think. Maybe we're on 8. I'm not really sure how many numbers we're at now so far. But definitely check out our other episodes. I'd really appreciate it. And if you could check out the other bands that we have, that would mean a really lot to me. This band that we've featured today is Short Stories. I think they're really cool. They really remind me of Further Seems Forever, Early Dashboard, Brand New. I don't know everything about their band, but you guys can check them out. I'll link them in the show notes. Please subscribe to our channel. There's, 10 of us so far. So, hey, 10 people is better than 0 people. And especially if you're part of the Drunk Ex-Pastors, I definitely appreciate a subscription. And if you retweet us or send us out, we'll drink a shot in your honor. So I would certainly appreciate that. I hope you guys have an awesome weekend. Please stay safe. And check out the Lovability Twitter. I'm not sure if they're selling their condoms yet, but if they are, definitely check them out. I don't get paid for them. I just think their product's really cool, and they kind of have a cool idea on things, and it's very sex positive and pretty cool. So this is Sex Positive Podcast for July the 3rd. I think that's Friday. I have no clue. Yeah, July the